the entity that's proposed here. Dominica will have a similar internal regulatory commission already in place, and their business will fall under that. So if you have a virtual asset, and that asset could be very tricky, it is along the same line as Bitcoin, where you have so many transactions and so forth, and they define a transaction by such a place. You have to put a prospectus out on this virtual asset to say what it is worth. And so people will be registered in Grenada, like the leader of the opposition could bring forward his digital component. He could go to GAFIN, and GAFIN will look at it and say, okay, we'll register you for it. Then you can trade for this. You and I may not accept it as payment, but Roberts and Huggins may accept it as payment. It cannot go through the same banking system. It must go through GAFIN, and all those people who will be affecting it, and you must register it. So it has this similar connotation as to respect to the three bills that we passed this morning. Under now, a local, not a multinational regulatory body, which in this case is GAFIN. You will have to pay a fee to GAFIN, and you'll see that in the schedule, $2,500. You'll have to pay a monthly fee, again, for your registration, etc. So, Mr. Speaker, excuse me, the asset, therefore, must not be a total digital representation form, like electronic something. You could pass 50 million EC dollars electronically to the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. That is not a virtual asset, because it must not simply be you're representing this and you're transferring it electronically. It has to be a new asset along the line as Bitcoins. You have 3 or 4 assets. So one of the reasons, Mr. Speaker, that they wanted to run these virtual assets in parallel with the monies, one, nobody could have control that you have to pass it to a corresponding bank. And if you recall, Mr. Speaker, through a corresponding bank, we had problems with this. You pass some money, say it's going in US dollars, it goes in British pound, you must pass it through an English bank, etc., which eventually gets through the controlling banks there. But with the virtual asset, it doesn't have to go through any bank. It goes through that system that you set up, that license system. And one of the reasons for moving to virtual assets is the fact that investors, countries feel that you don't have inflation. It does not go through inflation. But when they looked at 1/3 of the value of Bitcoin being wiped off in one day, right, some people start to think again. Does a virtual asset suffer the same fate that was making it great and in such demand? Well, the jury's still out on that. But you still have faith in it. Because if you can pay for it, if somebody accepts payment for it, Mr. Speaker, we don't have to see what we look for US dollars, and we look for this to buy in US dollars. What you have that virtual asset, and a company in the US will accept pay for it, you send that virtual asset electronically, and there it goes. Your component where you're doing your record base will be depleted by a certain amount of that virtual asset, and those people up there will increase. And if a lot of people want to trade that way, Mr. Speaker, then beautiful. It is happening now with different kinds of assets, virtual assets. And they're allowing us in the region, in Grenada, to set up our little bits and go on. So it might just be what? Instead of coin, you could call it mango coin, a mango bit, and you keep pushing it. Half of the people in Grenada might want to trade in it. That's your business, and you're licensed to trade in that. So a fellow give you 1 mango bit, 2 mango bits, and you give him something. You sell books, a provision, or whatever the case with him. You pay in with mango bits. That's not for the banking community. That's not for HCCB. That is for the licensed persons that GAFIN would have said, you have authority to deal in this. And before you go out with your mango bits, Mr. Speaker, you're supposed to get a prospectus in it. You're supposed to say what it's worth. So GAFIN will bring in the experts and say, no, This doesn't want all that, and you will have to give a proper prospectus so that people become involved in it. It's a new area that we're moving in, and this region does not want to be left behind. That is why the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, under the leadership of the distinguished governor, is promoting this. And hopefully, people believe that the economic powers that be, the member for St. Patrick West this morning talk about the powers that be. The member for the tongue of St. George mentioned that grouping again. That could be blocking you in so many ways. And one is to remove your corresponding bank. So you want to pay for something in US dollars, keep your EC. There's nothing you could do with it. You can't pay to bring down the goods. But with the virtual currency, you pay the man, you pay the firm you buying it from over there. This comes in, comes down to you, he gets payment for it. You could invest in securities. Yes, the same securities we're talking about there. Once those companies will want it, you can do it. So we say, no, let the country start. We will not have a lot, but you might have one or two young people, they may start to go on with it. So then they could start and grow. But I could tell you, Mr. Speaker, when I visited, again, China, one of the questions asked about us in the Caribbean, have we started the virtual asset yet? Because in the big world, companies were sitting there, buying and selling from each other, using virtual assets. Because if they use the US, problems. If they use other Asian countries, problems. Virtual assets. And that is by an individual company authorized by the regulatory body in that particular country from which they operate. And that be it. So it will be very good. The big powers that be would not be able to control you if we get this going. We've just started. We're a baby, a fledgling compared to the developed worlds, but it is of extreme importance to us, Mr. Speaker. I just want to mention some of the penalties in those bills that we mentioned before, where you can trade, even using the same virtual assets. You have $1 million at 10 years for the investment fund, 10 years in prison. If the company or they will try to do any other things that done legal things with you, that's the penalty. Then you have $10,000 and 2 years for the securities bills. That is that a lot of weight is placed on the investment fund. And Mr. Speaker, in the virtual assets, you have $10,000 and 2 years as the penalties, Mr. Speaker. In all the bills, of course, here come the powers that be. They tell you what information you must bring to your bank when you want to open an account, etc., etc. And they tell you that you must participate in this. As a matter of fact, I think next year we will be undergoing our AML, anti-money laundering, and crime fighting surveillance by the international community. Do we have all of this in place? The virtual assets, that's when they figure, a lot of them, we had to put this into the bill. Because virtual assets, you could escape money's going if you're going to pay through the virtual assets, and they can't watch you from the central banks and so. So, Mr. Speaker, if we look at clause 24 in the virtual assets bill, we'll see exactly what I'm talking about. That's on page, I think, 18. Consequential amendments. 24.1. Regulations 2 of the Proceeds of Crime, Anti-Money Laundering, and Terrorist Financing Regulations 2012 is amended in the definition of relevant business by inserting after paragraph M the following new paragraph. And the following new paragraph takes in virtual assets. When the bill was passed, we were not thinking about it that way. But the powers that be say, no, I must be able to control you no matter how you hide, left, right, center, and so on. So if I can't take you in, I'll come under the Anti-Money Laundering Act and see how we could still fit control. I'm not saying the Anti-Money Laundering Act is bad at all. I am saying that is one way that they could push in by telling you, well, I confiscate your money if you pass through my bank. In the same way, they could come in and say, well, in the anti-money laundering through the virtual asset bill, Mr. Speaker. And every one of the bills we touched this morning, there is an area for the powers that be to push in and prevent something. If it is a crime, yes, none of us wants it. But if it is just to sanction and to say you should not be purchasing from this country, you should not be doing that, well, this your sovereignty is being approached on there, and it's in those areas that we were saying that, they should not be really infiltrating, but you're dealing, and we know that you're dealing with the powers that be, and so these things are inherent in the bills that we pass. Mr. Speaker, this is the digital age, and so we want to encourage our people to make use of it, do it legally, and to encourage our young people to participate in building the economy of our country. I recommend this bill for its second reading.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Special good afternoon to everyone. I stand in support of the Virtual Asset Business Bill. Mr. Speaker, like my colleague just mentioned, we are in a digital age, and as such, we will be having digital representation in the example that was given by him. I want to approach it from the local person's point of view, though, and just to relate it to what it would mean for a local person, our country gets to that level. Mr. Speaker, many countries are going virtual, or they're becoming what's called cashless societies. Mr. Speaker, a cashless society describes an economic state whereby financial transactions are not conducted with money in the form of physical banknotes or coins or anything like that, but rather it's through the transfer of digital information. Just like what was explained by my colleague as what is done in a virtual asset business at that higher level there, where trading is done digitally, where funds are transferred for use of payment and investment purposes, with Bitcoin being one of the example of a cryptocurrency. Mr. Speaker, countries like Switzerland, China, and the United Kingdom are already almost there in becoming cashless societies. In the year 2022, those three countries should be almost there, like 85 to 90%, functioning at the cashless level. Mr. Speaker, what they have done is to introduce new technologies, new services, new and faster way of doing business, so that there's no need to count money. There would be no counterfeit money. There'll be no theft of money by robbers and, by employees. Mr. Speaker, Little Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique, do you think that we're ready to move there? Do you think that we're ready for what the MP for St. George's Southeast just spoke about at that level of trading? Do you think we as people are ready to move out the cash from the drawers of the village shop or of the supermarkets? Are we ready to have cashless banks? Is that possible, Mr. Speaker? Persons might be saying, no way, that cannot be possible. Particularly, Mr. Speaker, knowing that so many people do not have bank accounts in our communities, most less a credit card. So you would be saying, well, no, we are not ready. That's not possible. Where? Here, Little Grenada? That's no way possible. But, Mr. Speaker, we have to be optimistic, and in my view, with God, all things are possible. And so based on that, Mr. Speaker, and a little technology from the Ministry of ICT and the staff at the Prime Minister's office, In the month of July, Mr. Speaker, 5,000 Grenadians will be shopping for school clothes without cash in their pockets. Also, 150 elderly citizens, Mr. Speaker, will also be shopping without cash in their pockets. Mr. Speaker, you may be asking, well, how come Granny going to be part of this cashless society less than a month and a half away? Well, you know, June, July. Just a couple weeks away. Mr. Speaker, if Granny has a cell phone just like this, but if she don't, it wouldn't be a problem either. If Granny has a cell phone like this, she will get a message on her phone that would contain all the information for her to go and collect her $300 as is given to her by the Ministry of Social Development. Mr. Speaker, she could also use her phone to go shop in the supermarket, buy her groceries. She can go to the pharmacy and buy her medication. Mr. Speaker, the 5,000 Grenadians that I told you about would be the recipients of the school uniform program. And as such, Mr. Speaker, most of them have their smartphones. So what it is that we will be doing from the Prime Minister's office, the Prime Minister's ministry, is to send out a QR code to these people on their phones. And the maximum they can get is $450, and so someone who's entitled to $450 will receive that. It would be in a little photo, a little square with some lines on it, called a QR code. They take that, they go to this, they go to the vendors, the stores that sell school clothes, and these vendors will have terminals, Mr. Speaker. And so they will scan the QR code on the people's phone. But like I said, if they don't have phone, that's not a problem. We just print that little photo on a little card for them, and they would carry that to the store. So if Granny does not have a phone, it's not a problem. But if Granny cannot also walk, Mr. Speaker, it's not a problem either. Because what will happen, we will have a second photo on that QR code that will enable someone to get the service at that store wherever they go to buy the school uniform. So, Mr. Speaker, they get scanned, their face show up, and so they can proceed to do business. Mr. Speaker, these are vulnerable persons. Vulnerable persons, Mr. Speaker, in our society, who will be the first to have this opportunity in our Tri-Island state to go cashless in a pilot project that the government of Grenada, the Ministry of ICT, signed with a company in Trinidad called WePay to provide digital disbursement of funds to our citizens. Mr. Speaker, business providers who would be signing up in virtual assets, businesses as well have to be legitimate, because they will be managing funds like government will be doing for its people. At the level, of stocks and bonds, or whether it is at the level of payment of funds and grants, whatever it is that those businesses are functioning in, that there is this proper framework that is in place. And so, Mr. Speaker, We know very well that there'll be a major issue of cybersecurity. Once you go digital, there's always issue in cyberspace. And so, Mr. Speaker, we find what it is that can happen is that virtual assets business, or whether it is, there is that great risk that criminals can use it to launder money and to fund terrorism. We also, so that would be a challenge, Mr. Speaker. So this bill provides for all of this to ensure that only the proper persons would be allowed to operate the business here in Grenada. And so we are very happy about that, Mr. Speaker, that any people with criminal intention will not have the opportunity to control the service providers' accounts. So passing this virtual bill would, ensuring that each applicant go through a rigorous form of registration is also very important, and we do commend that. Finally, Mr. Speaker, our government is developing the financial sector, and we're doing so now so that we can cater for the need for this regulatory framework as it is put in place. Mr. Speaker, this bill falls under our cybersecurity framework, which was developed right here in Grenada by our ICT team. Our government has prioritized in the National Sustainable Development Plan 2035 the implementation of a national digital agenda, Mr. Speaker, as a key success factor for driving activities across all sectors of our economy. Mr. Speaker, our national cybersecurity plan will be implemented by our Ministry of ICT to lead both public and private sectors, all of our citizens, through a digital transformation, a journey that is expected to take about 5 years, Mr. Speaker. That program will be done by our public as well as private ICT officers, and they would be supported by the FIU, the Financial Intelligence Unit, and the Royal Grenada Police Force, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the goal is really to use that financial technology industry, because that is what is being created now, a financial technology industry. The whole objective really is to create a safe and secure cashless society. And as such, Mr. Speaker, having legal frameworks for virtual assets, businesses at all levels will surely assist in making our digital journey a much smoother one. We believe that this framework combined with this bill will make it easier for all Grenadians in Carriacou and also in Petit-Martinique to do digital transactions and lead to a better and brighter future for our people. And I just want to say to all of our Grenadians who will be going cashless in the month of July and August and shopping with your phones, just to let you know, we are doing a pilot project. We may or may not have some challenges, but let us face it together as we move forward to create a cashless society in Little Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit-Martinique. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Honourable Representative for St. Patrick East. Honourable Representative for St. Patrick West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just one inquiry. I support the bill. I think this is the way forward. This is the age we are living in, and we have to adapt to it. But just one question, Mr. Speaker. Will the government be involved in this virtual asset business as well? The government will be involved. They will. Or then I'm asking that question with regards to self-regulation. Will the government be regulating itself, or will there be an independent body set up to deal with that on behalf of government, so as to not make government is seen as regulating itself. That's whatever I asked that question.
Leader of Government Business, would you like to clarify, or any other member?
No, I'm not.
Parliamentary representative.
No, Mr. Speaker, I'm not taking the floor to answer the question. I'm taking the floor to contribute.
Okay, so
To the debate. Yeah.
Your question will be answered a little later, sir. Parliamentary representative.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, I rise to give my support to this virtual asset business bill. Because as we move to transform our economy and to move to digital economy, we always have to have legislation in place. This law would not cover everything, but one of the main reasons for this virtual asset bill is to assess and mitigate the risk associated with virtual asset. Because you have risk in everything you do. So when you're doing business by virtual asset, there's certain risk. This legislation is an attempt to mitigate the risk. I think I needed to say that because in all aspects you have the marketplace that's moving fast, private individuals are going, and government is there. And if government is not keeping up to date to mitigate the risk associated with all these things, they will have to play catch up. And so I'm happy that we are discussing this bill. It also provides a legislative framework, because it is important that when you want to implement any measure, that you have a good legislative framework for the registration and supervision of virtual asset business. And this is confined to the ECCU, the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union. This bill is to regulate and have a strong regulatory framework for member states of the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union. The third point I wish to make is that the bill applies to persons who, whether before or after the commencement of this legislation, is involved in virtual asset business. So whether you doing it now or whether you come after, this bill will apply to you. And clause 12 provides for the requirement for an external auditor to be approved and audited financial statement to be provided annually. So if you're doing the virtual asset business, you'll have to get an external auditor and you must provide financial statements annually. My concern in all of this and in all of this legislation and virtual asset transaction is the taxes for government. How government get the taxes from this business? I think we need to look at that too. And that's part of the risk too. Because if everybody going to do virtual business and you can collect, how are you collecting corporation tax? How are you collecting income tax? How are you collecting profit? So I think we have to, as government, we run the government based on collection of taxes, and we need to focus all these things and the impact or the implication it will have on the collection of government revenue. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Representative for St. David. Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank my colleagues, as always, for bringing up some very important and relevant points to the debate. First of all, Mr. Speaker, I would like to say that the fiat currencies, the government will be involved in that, the central banks and governments back only. In fact, a currency will not be fiat if it's backed by the government plus a commodity, like gold or cocoa or something moving it. Strictly fiat currencies, and that's what we have in the region. No, the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union governments do not plan to get involved in the business of virtual assets. As the member for St. David put in, you take a private currency, a private entity, a company. They may have a lot of monies there, so they get involved in a unit, whatever that virtual currency is. They must apply to GAFIN, for the regulations of financial institutions in the in Grenada, they may name something else in another country, and they will say what they have and how they call the product that they will be trading. In the example given by the Minister for ICT, that company doing the pilot in Trinidad will be trading some digital value, however they want to call it, but for a certain amount of dollars. And in the first part, interpretation part of the bill, you have one, virtual asset business means the conduct of one or more of the following activities or operations for or on behalf of another person. Exchange between a virtual asset and the fiat currency. Fiat currency is EC dollar. So there will be some exchange. So the person sends the virtual assets on the phone and things to anybody, but there is an exchange between them. It's for a while. You know that Bitcoin was some 400 and something thousand US dollars for one Bitcoin. That was the exchange. And because China decided that no, we will not allow you to pay for goods with that, it fell, one third slip off it right away. So that institute of removing from the digital virtual asset to the fiat currency is what will give the little people on the phone the $300. We don't know what they'll value their thing for. And they must give a prospectus so that people can know what it is. When I'm buying this virtual asset, in order to pay for something that I don't want to be stopped at the border, in the international rules in Trinidad and Tobago, you can't get out my TT dollars, but that virtual asset will leave there and come out in Grenada. And it has a value for somebody who has it here. And with it, they can buy something else anyway, maybe in Trinidad or in Grenada. Although this is only for Grenada, it does not have the international connotation of what we were speaking about this morning. As the Minister for ICT said, we're fledgling, we're just starting. We'll expand it if it grows. Exchange between one or more form of virtual assets. So if company B has a virtual asset, and he wants to exchange between company A with their virtual assets, that's the business that GAFIN must look at. They will see the prospectus and the value, what value both keep, and they will tell you how much you should pay one for the other. So it's a new realm, but it's not all that difficult once we get our hands on the helm, Mr. Speaker. Safekeeping or administration of a virtual asset or instruments enabling control over virtual assets. All of this GAFIN will have to be in control over. So when we mention again, Mr. Speaker, cybercrime, and you see the arrangement that they have made together, GAFIN together with the FIU, together with other securities. Because we're in the ECCU, maybe we'll get more cooperation on this issue between the ECCU member countries. But that is of extreme importance, Mr. Speaker. Cyber threat. You can't get the physical cash to rob anymore, but you could sit behind your computer and your ICT, and maybe you can push. We have not heard much about cybercrime with the virtual assets that are in place around the world in the more developed countries now, Mr. Speaker. Maybe they've placed a lot of emphasis on it. So we expect to learn from them in that regard. And with respect to getting the taxes, very important point, we must make sure IRD division is trained in that section. We don't have many people here, but a company must be registered with GAFIN so they will know. And that company must say, if I am making profit, then they must put together, and they have to be audited. So you must have the rules for the audit department to say that you made X amount of monies. Maybe just through appreciation. The demand for your virtual asset has gone through the roof, just as Bitcoin did. So over a year, you made a lot of profit just through appreciation. But that is profit. The IRD, Inland Revenue Department, must know that you've made a profit and you'll be taxed accordingly. Whether or not you'll put special tax rate for virtual assets, as we go forward, working with the ECCB, we'll see whether this makes sense. If it doesn't take off, well, people will hardly pay whatever taxes because they would not be making a lot. They may not even cross the threshold. But if they do, very important point made by the member for St. David, Mr. Speaker. And again, I want to compliment the contributions from my two colleagues and to allow the public to know that this will be regulated. Any young minds who wish to really participate and get involved, they can get the required training and they can do things in a cashless way. Not only the company from Trinidad and Tobago has come to do it, and we must go further because we're supposed to be able to name the virtual asset that you will be using on your phones. And you will also be able to ensure that the cyber criminals do not get into your business, Mr. Speaker. So the sky is the limit. The world is opening before us. And information and technology and the digital age are here. And we should benefit from it, Mr. Speaker. I therefore recommend this bill for its second reading.
Honorable members, the question is that the bill entitled Virtual Asset Business Bill 2021 be read a second time. Those who are of that opinion, say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary opinion, say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
A bill for an act shortly entitled Virtual Asset Business Bill 2021.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that the House resolve itself into a committee of the whole House to consider the bill.
Clause.
Clause. Parts by part?
No, clause.
Clause by clause.
Clause, yes. No parts. Honorable members, the question is that this honorable House resolves itself into a committee of the whole House to consider the bill clause by clause. Those who are of that opinion, say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, say nay. The ayes have it. I have about 24 clauses. Honorable members, the House is now in committee.
Clause 2, interpretation.
Honorable members, the question is that clause 2, interpretation, forms part of the bill. Those who are of that opinion, say aye. Aye.
Clause 3, application.
Honorable members, the question is that clause 3, application, forms part of the bill. Those who are of that opinion, say aye. Aye.
Clause 4, requirement for registration.
Honorable members, the question is that clause 4 forms part of the bill. Those who are of that opinion, say aye.
Clause 5, registers.
Honorable members, the question is that clause 5, registers, forms part of the bill. Those who are of that opinion, say aye.
Clause 6, application for registration.
Honorable members, the question is that clause 6, application for registration, forms part of the bill. Those who are of that opinion, say aye.
Clause 7, grant and refusal of application for registration.
Honorable members, the question is that clause 7 forms part of the bill. Those who are of that opinion, say aye.
Clause 8, restriction or condition for registration.
Honorable members, the question is that clause 8 forms part of the bill. All those of that opinion, say aye.
Clause 9, certificate of registration and renewal.
Honorable members, the question is that clause 9 forms part of the bill. Those of that opinion, say aye.
Clause 10, appointment and obligations of principal representative.
Honorable members, the question is that clause 10 forms part of the bill. Those of that opinion, say aye.
Clause 11, requirements of a registrant.
Honorable members, the question is that clause 11 forms part of the bill. Those of that opinion, say aye.
Clause 12, audit and financial statements.
Honorable members, the question is that clause 12 forms part of the bill. Those of that opinion, say aye.
Clause 13, prospectus for issue or sale of a virtual asset.
Honorable members, the question is that clause 13 forms part of the bill. Those who are of that opinion, say aye.
Clause 14, powers of the authority for regarding a prospectus.
Honorable members, the question is that clause 14 forms part of the bill. Those who are of that opinion, say aye.
Clause 15, amendment to a prospectus.
Honourable members, the question is that clause 15 forms part of the bill. Those who are of that opinion say aye.
Clause 16, general powers of the authority.
Honourable members, the question is that clause 16, general powers of the authority, forms part of the bill. Those who are of that opinion say aye.
Clause 17, fees.
Honourable members, the question is that clause 17, fees, forms part of the bill. Those who are of that opinion say aye.
Clause 18, revocation and suspension of registration.
Honourable members, the question is that clause 18, revocation and suspension of registration, forms part of the bill. Those who are of that opinion say aye.
Clause 19, offenses and penalties.
Honourable members, the question is that clause 19, offences and penalties, forms part of the bill. Those who are of that opinion say aye.
Clause 20, exclusion of liability.
Honourable members, the question is that clause 20, exclusion of liability, forms part of the bill. Those who are of that opinion say aye.
Clause 21, power to amend schedules.
Honourable members, the question is that clause 21, power to amend schedule, forms part of the bill. Those who are of that opinion say aye.
Clause 22, regulations.
Honourable members, the question is that clause 22, regulation, forms part of the bill. Those who are of that opinion say aye.
Clause 23, guidelines.
Honourable members, the question is that clause 23, guidelines, forms part of the bill. Those who are of that opinion say aye.
Clause 24, consequential amendments.
Honourable members, the question is that clause 24, consequential amendments, form part of the bill. Those who are of that opinion say aye.
Schedule 1, fees.
Honourable members, Schedule 1 forms part of the bill. Those who are of that opinion say aye.
Schedule 2, certificate of registration.
Honourable members, the question is that Schedule 2 forms part of the bill. Those who are of that opinion say aye.
Schedule 3, requirements for a prospectus.
Honourable members, the question is that Schedule 3 forms part of the bill. Those who are of that opinion say aye.
Clause 1, short title.
Honourable members, the question is that Clause 1, short title, forms part of the bill. Those who are of that opinion say aye. Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I beg to move that the House resumes and the Chairman of the committee reports progress on the bill.
Honourable members, the question is that this Honourable House resumes and the Chairman of Committee reports progress on the bill. Those who are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. In the ayes have it. Honourable members, this Honourable House resumes. I have to report that the bill was considered by a committee of the whole House and passed without amendments. Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that the Chairman's report be adopted.
Honourable members, the question is that the Chairman's report be adopted. Those who have that opinion say aye.
Aye.
The contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the third reading of the bill.
Honourable members, the question proposed is that the bill be read a third time. Honourable members, the question is that the bill be read a third time and passed. Those who are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
A bill for an act shortly entitled Virtual Asset Business Bill 2021.
Item 16, request for leave to move the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the adjournment of this Honourable House. I need aye.
Honourable members, the question proposed is that this Honourable House adjourns. Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise on an observation that I must make. First, let me at this point in time, I think I know that from the time the year began, or this session of Parliament, we have gone through a lot. And so too, I want to, on the behalf of my family, do extend our condolences to the Clerk of Parliament who lost his father a couple months ago. And so I thought I should mention it there because we all were at a loss some point in time, even from former members here. Mr. Speaker, I believe that I should raise a few points here that is very pertinent, especially to the actions of the Leader of Her Majesty's Opposition. When I became Leader of Her Majesty's Opposition, I was designated an office in the building here, just outside the door. My secretary was have a bit conversation on behalf of Her Majesty's Opposition. I mean, in my judgment, how can we in this country continue to let that happen? To go down that road, that you listen now, and when you do listen, at the level of almost disrespect for authority, those within government, those within the law, those for the police officers and so forth. I mean, over the past few weeks while Parliament was out in different villages, no respect for the police, gunshot here and there. And it's like a rise. And a certain level of lawlessness start creeping in within our society. I'm asking the question again as to what is going on. Are we losing a grip of ourselves or a grip of our society? Are we continuing to just let, we just go down that road and continue to slide down that road? And when we have a lawless society, I know we are in COVID times, and even some people that would come to me and call to me, and because certain authorities have been placed in the arms of the law, then the law becomes unto themselves. We say sometimes, just give a man a power, and you know exactly who he is because he has some power. And sometimes I see within our society overreach. Imagine this morning I spoke about the container in the road, Mr. Speaker. I sent you a picture. And the trying to get them to move the container, and they have people in high places so the container would not be moved. In a society today, that people would crave now that maybe if you have to get something done in this country, you have to be associated with a certain kind of people. Mr. Speaker, I say we got to be careful with what we ask for and what we do. And I do hope that my brother really gets through with negotiations in terms of getting the people or the 4%, because that is what they're crying about. Mr. Speaker, I visit the hospital from time to time. Sometimes I visit it, and the nurses are crying out. And you know what they're crying out about, Mr. Speaker? It seems like the public service is decimated in that a lot of the workers now, you have nurses that have the degree in nursing, they become RN, they go, they study, they come back, and they get a contract. A contract for 1 year, or for the most might be 2 years. They want to leave too. But when they go to any institution with a contract for a year or 2 years, if the institution have to give them any semblance of a loan, it is just for the 2 years. So you cannot, maybe they want to buy a car, they want to build a house, but you cannot pay it back in a year, you cannot do anything. So they cannot move themselves. What are we doing to our own people? After all, they are Grenadians too, one nurse told me, Mr. Clement, after all these years, I might consider becoming a traffic warden because they are getting more money than I am. In some cases, $1,800. And here you are, Mr. Speaker, and some of these things must be investigated, that you are qualified. You went abroad, you study, you come back. And contract from year to year to year. And they asked me to mention it. I go to Carriacou and it's the same thing. The nurses there are crying out too. The teachers asked me, how come we're not hearing anything? I went to the march on May Day. And I was telling one of the officers, I said, the 4% is not only for the teachers, but it is for public workers too. And even the police officers would get the 4%. I said it before, Mr. Speaker. In this COVID time when we are talking about stimulus package, give them the 4%. Treat it as a stimulus package. It might push some monies into the economy and things will start again. But no, Mr. Speaker, we're not going to give them any money. Maybe we are frightened at this point. Because if it is true, what goes around comes around. I remember when H.A. Blaze paid the money after he sold the assets in Cable and Wireless at the time, he subsequently passed away. If this time we have to sell Grenlec assets, whosoever might be there might pass away, so they're afraid to pay the workers. But I would not go down that road, Mr. Speaker. I would say, oh, sire, live forever. But we say in this country, the longest prayer has an end. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Leader of the Opposition. Let me just say that to those who were preparing the bills, it's a long time. We have gone through so many bills, and all we can say is pass without amendments. So I want to commend and please express the Parliament's commendation for this time, and hope that that would be the way it goes. Leader of Government Business, you did say that we were going to go and finish on time, and I doubted you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to take this opportunity to thank my colleagues, because we all understand that there was a request that we treated very significantly, because we respect and recognize everyone in Grenada, particularly those people who do not have a voice here. So whenever a request comes, some may not have gone for it, but I can tell you that the government took it very seriously. And Mr. Speaker, you and I have spoken on many occasions on the way we do business here. I know in the UK, where they have many, many members, they have time to speak, and they impart a lot within a limited time. And so we are advocating for some system of impetus, some stimulus, some training, whereby we can do so. I think today shows that we can really do it if we wish, and we should continue along that particular street. In part, you really gave us the guidance this morning when you say impart efficiently, words to that effect. And let us make sure that we honor the commitment that we made to staff. And I want to thank all my colleagues for so doing. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for really setting the tone earlier this morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Leader of Government Business. Honorable members, the question is that this Honorable House now stands adjourned, sine die.
You know, one day I woke up and, you know, they painted a set of pedestrian crossing all along the streets. You know, nobody told us how to use that thing properly.
I know how.
You're serious?
Every safe, good driver knows about these things. As a driver, you have to be very attentive. You know you're coming up close to a pedestrian cross, you start slowing down immediately, looking to see if there's any pedestrian on the side getting ready to cross. If there is, you stop on the line that is a certain distance before the crosswalk. Then you would see the pedestrian put their hands out, looking directly at you, indicating that they are going to cross. And only when you have come to a complete stop, that is when they will quickly and safely cross to the other side. And then you continue happily on your journey.
Stop, look, hand out, eye contact, wait for pedestrian to cross. Then you happily continue on your journey.
This message is brought to you by this group of insurance companies, the Traffic Advisory Body, and the Traffic Department.
Things you need to know about self-isolation. Stay home. If you are told to self-isolate, it means staying at home, not going to work, school, or other public places, and you should not have any visitors. Separate yourself. If you live with others, then you need to stay in a well-ventilated bedroom with the doors shut. If you have to share a bathroom, then use it after everyone else. Don't share towels and toiletries, as this may put others at risk. Call ahead. If you develop symptoms such as a fever or cough, then seek advice first by calling the Ministry of Health's hotline at 538-4787 or 458-4787. Please do not show up at a medical center or hospital, as this may put others at risk. Take care with waste. If you test positive, your waste should be double bagged and disposed of separately. Create a buddy system. If you live on your own, you can plan with friends and family to check in with each other and run essential errands if one becomes sick. Once sick, they should leave groceries on the doorstep. Why it's important. COVID-19 causes a mild illness for 4 out of 5 persons. Self-isolating will help protect the older generation and those who may have underlying health problems from getting infected.
Stomport careless or intentional bushfires, dead out. Youths, hunters, smokers, let's prevent bushfires. Here's why.
Yeah, bushfires. The shoreline's wet, crops should be bushfires. Can lead to food scarcity, threatened biodiversity, cause water shortage with a calamity. Bushfires in watersheds deplete water quality, threaten property, life and security. Bushfires set intentionally, water insanity.
Bushfires can cost millions in losses annually and are often caused by careless or intentional actions indictable under the law. Forests are life-giving. Save them. A message from the Fire Department of the Royal Grenada Police Force and the Caribbean Open Trade Support.
Hey folks, you're invited to tune in to Grenada Music to the World program, hosted by Eugene Gittins on Saturday mornings from 10 a.m. to 12 noon on Classic Radio 105.5, 105.9, Hot FM 98.5, 98.7, GBN TV, and all their social media platforms. The only totally local music program in Grenada, representing all genres of music. So it's Green's Music to the World on Saturday mornings from 10 a.m. to 12 noon on GBN with the music icon himself, Mr. Eugene Gittins. See you then.
COVID-19 is an infectious disease caused by a new coronavirus introduced to humans for the first time. It is spread from person to person, mainly through the droplets produced when an infected person speaks, coughs, or sneezes. These droplets can land in the mouths or noses of people who are nearby. These droplets are too heavy to travel far in the air. They only travel approximately 1 meter and quickly settle on surfaces. This is the reason person-to-person spread is happening mainly between close contacts. The exact time that the virus can survive on surfaces is not yet known. So it is wise to clean surfaces regularly, particularly in the vicinity of people infected with COVID-19. Hands touch many surfaces, which can be contaminated with the virus. You should therefore avoid touching your eyes, nose, or mouth, since contaminated hands can transfer the virus from the surface to yourself. When coughing or sneezing, cover your mouth and nose with the bend of your elbow or use a disposable tissue. If a tissue is used, discard it immediately into a closed bin. The most effective way to prevent the spread of the new coronavirus is to clean your hands frequently with an alcohol-based hand rub or soap and water. This will eliminate the virus if it is on your hands. Stay healthy and prevent the spread of COVID-19.
Can you spend wisely and have more savings? Yes, you can. Learn more with Money Matters on GBN Television. The Money Matters series explores 12 top ways to save money. In this series, you would learn how to save by setting up your spending money right. Save on vehicle loans, home improvement projects, your credit cards, and even on prescription drugs. Tune in every Tuesday morning at 7:15 for Money Matters, a lighthearted conversation with financial planner Tali Francis. Follow the rebroadcast on Thursdays at 6:50 p.m. and on Sundays at 7:30 p.m. Money Matters is a financial literacy public awareness program sponsored by Republic Bank Grenada.
Republic Bank, we're the one for you.
No, that's not how you cross the pedestrian crossing.
Really? One day I just woke up and I saw pedestrian crosswalks on the road. No one really showed me how to use them properly.
Well, this is how it's done. You never cross before doing these things. They might save your life. First, when you get to the crosswalk, you stop. You look left, you look right. If there's a vehicle coming, you put your hand out, making eye contact with the driver, indicating that you want to cross. And only when the vehicle comes to a complete stop, you quickly cross to the other side.
Stop, look, hand out, eye contact. Wait for pedestrian to cross to the other side, then you happily continue on your journey. This message is brought to you by this group of insurance companies, the Traffic Advisory Body, and the Traffic Department.
No, that's not how you cross the pedestrian crossing.
Really? One day I just woke up and I saw pedestrian crosswalks on the road. No one really showed me how to use them properly.
Well, this is how it's done. You never cross before doing these things. They might save your life. First, when you get to the crosswalk, you stop. You look left, you look right. If there's a vehicle coming, you put your hand out, making eye contact with the driver, indicating that you want to cross. And only when the vehicle comes to a complete stop, you quickly cross to the other side.
Stop, look, hand out, eye contact. Wait for pedestrian to cross to the other side, then you happily continue on your journey. This message is brought to you by this group of insurance companies, the Traffic Advisory Body, and the Traffic Department.